The day they lowered Eleanor into the ground, something colder than the autumn wind settled into my chest. I stood there surrounded by flowers she would have loved and faces she cherished. Yet one face, one absence, hollowed the air more than the grave itself. That silence didn't come from grief. It came from choice. And from that moment forward, the ground kept shifting beneath everything I believed was solid. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't raise a hand. But I did raise a mirror to the truth. And what stared back wasn't just betrayal. It was entitlement dressed in blood. If you're someone who understands how deep disappointment can cut, how dignity sometimes comes in quiet, then lean in. Like this story if it strikes a nerve. Subscribe if you want more like it. And down in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. And when was the moment you realized someone you love had been gone long before they left? The morning Eleanor died, the house seemed to breathe with a silence I'd never known, as if everything inside it was holding still in mourning. I stood in our kitchen, still wearing the black tie I tried on 3 times, each time adjusting it out of habit rather than need. On the counter sat Eleanor's favorite coffee mug, the light blue one with tiny faded daisies, lipstick still faintly visible along the rim. Her reading glasses rested beside it, lenses smudged from the book she never got to finish. For a few seconds, I stared at that cup as if it might move, as if she might walk in humming her usual morning tune. But she didn't. She never would again. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and dialed Nathan's number. It rang 4 times before he answered, his voice groggy. "Yeah," he muttered. "Nathan, it's me," I said. "Your mom's funeral is today, 11:30. I just wanted to before I could finish. I heard loud music pounding through the phone, laughter in the background, and what I assumed was Chloe yelling about party decorations." Nathan cut me off. "Dad, I told you yesterday. Chloe's birthday party is tonight. We've been planning it for months." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Nathan, your mother died. Her funeral is today. You don't get another chance at this." He let out a sigh that sounded more annoyed than grieving. "Look, Dad, I get it. But Mom's gone. She's not coming back. Chloe's birthday only happens once a year. We've got the caterers booked, the band's setting up right now. I can't just cancel it all. You understand, right?" "Understand?" I felt like I'd been slapped. I gripped the receiver tighter. "Your mother raised you for 35 years," I said, my voice lower now, firmer. "She deserved the respect of her only child." But the line was already dead. He'd hung up. I stood there, frozen in place, phone still to my ear, listening to the dial tone buzz like some cruel echo. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at the clock. 8:47 a.m., and felt everything inside me collapse into something hard and hollow. The rest of the morning blurred. I drove to the cemetery in Eleanor's Honda, the one she insisted we use because it was better for the environment. I sat through the service, barely hearing the pastor talk about family and eternal love. 23 people came to say goodbye to Eleanor. Our neighbors, her garden club friends, even her old co-worker from the diner. But not our son, not Nathan. I stood alone by her casket, the wind catching the hem of the black suit she'd helped me pick out 2 years ago for her friend's funeral. Her sister Helen asked me, again and again, "Where's Nathan?" And each time I said the same thing. He had important commitments. The words tasted like ashes. At home, the silence deepened. No hum of Eleanor in the kitchen. No smell of her morning coffee. I dropped my keys on the little hook she'd installed by the door, and they clinked like gunshots in the stillness. I sat in the old brown leather armchair she always said clashed with her floral curtains, the ones I always meant to replace, but never did. Now I never would. The photo of us on our wedding day sat on the mantel. Eleanor was radiant in her grandmother's lace dress, eyes shining with hope. We'd built everything from scratch. Me with my construction jobs, her with long shifts at the diner, both of us pouring everything into raising Nathan. Every memory came rushing back. His first steps across that very living room, Eleanor cheering with tears in her eyes. The handmade birthday decorations when we couldn't afford store-bought. The nights we ate macaroni and cheese while she whispered, "We're building his future." I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the chair, staring at nothing. At 8:15 the next morning, the phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Hey, Dad." Nathan's voice was bright, upbeat, as if nothing had happened. "Hope you're doing okay after yesterday." No mention of the funeral. "No, sorry I wasn't there." Just empty chatter. I waited. "Listen, the party was amazing," he continued. "But we went a little overboard. You know how Chloe gets with planning. We hired this great band, took everyone to that new steakhouse downtown, and I got her a diamond bracelet. She deserves it, you know? But now we're facing some bills, like 15 grand in credit cards." That was her way. I rose from the chair and walked back into our bedroom, suddenly needing to feel her presence more than anything. The closet still held her scent, lavender and cedar, from the sachets she tucked into drawers like little secrets. I didn't come looking for anything in particular, but when I pulled down the old quilt box from the top shelf, it thudded onto the bed like it had weight far beyond fabric. Inside, instead of quilts, were folders, old, well-handled, lovingly labeled in Eleanor's script. At first I thought it might be scrapbooking, but when I opened the first folder, I realized it was so much more. There were report cards going all the way back to kindergarten. Every spelling test, every science project, every certificate that Nathan had ever brought home. Each one had a note written in the margin by Eleanor, "So proud," or "Our brilliant boy." I flipped through them slowly, realizing she had saved every little triumph of his like sacred artifacts. At the bottom of the box was a thick, spiral-bound notebook. It was Eleanor's handwriting, neatly organized and dated year by year. The first page read, "Financial support for Nathan, starting 2008. As I began reading, I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Eleanor had recorded every dollar we'd ever given him. Not out of bitterness, but out of devotion. College tuition, $208,000 over 4 years. Graduate school, even though he dropped out after a year, $48,000. His first car, $35,000. Emergency repairs, $5,000. Wedding to Chloe, $75,000. House down payment, $350,000. Additional house expenses, bills, furniture, decor, $22,000. Chloe's failed business venture, $30,000. Vacation loans that were never returned, $15,000. Birthday gifts for Chloe, $6,000 over several years. Every expense was logged with a simple note. Delayed anniversary trip. Canceled doctor's appointment. Used grocery savings. Told Richard not to worry. There were no complaints in her words, only quiet reminders of what she gave up for the boy she loved. My throat tightened when I reached the final page. Written in blue ink, shakier than the rest, were the words, "We gave Nathan everything. I hope he remembers us kindly. Love, E." I sat down on the bed, notebook in my hands, and stared at the open drawer where her nightgowns still lay folded. How had we let this happen? How had we raised a son who could treat her death as a scheduling conflict, and then call me the next day to ask for money like nothing had happened? I opened the calculator app on my phone and began adding everything she had logged. I double-checked, triple-checked. The final total came to $847,000, nearly $1 million. My hands trembled as I stared at the number. I remember my father giving me $20 and a handshake when I left home at 18. "Build your own life," he'd said. I hated him for it at the time, but now I wondered if maybe he'd had the right idea. Nathan hadn't built anything. He'd stepped into a life that Eleanor and I had built with our blood, sweat, and bones and treated it like an endless well. I went to my office and pulled open the file cabinet. I had kept every financial document from the past 20 years, and now I combed through them with cold precision. Each transfer to Nathan, each check I wrote, each expense we absorbed was another thread in a web we had spun to make his life easier, while never questioning how far we'd stretched our own. On my desk sat a photo of the three of us at Nathan's college graduation. He was grinning, cap tilted, arms around both of us. We looked happy. Maybe we were. But I noticed something I hadn't before. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't pride. It was entitlement. We'd paid for that degree with Eleanor's extra shifts at the diner and my weekend contracting jobs. He never said thank you, just smiled for the photo and moved on. As I stared at that image, something hardened in me. Not just grief, not just anger, something like resolve. Eleanor had loved him so much that she had masked the truth until her last breath. But the truth was sitting here in front of me, in her handwriting, in the numbers, in the silence she left behind. Nathan didn't just forget his mother. He cashed her in. I didn't have an answer, but I knew this. It had to stop. The day after I rediscovered everything Eleanor had tracked, I found myself staring at my phone again, unsure why I even kept it on. Maybe a part of me still wanted Nathan to call and say he was sorry, that he had made a terrible mistake, that missing the funeral was the biggest regret of his life. But I knew better. When the phone rang just past 10 a.m., I didn't even need to check the caller ID. I already knew it was him. I answered with a flat, "Hello." Nathan's voice was its usual blend of upbeat and opportunistic, the tone he always used when he was about to ask for something. "Hey, Dad. Hope you're doing all right. Listen, I wanted to follow up about something." I waited, silent, already bracing myself. So, Chloe's birthday party was incredible. Everyone had a great time. But, well, we kind of went overboard. You know how it goes. Steakhouse bill got huge. The band added a surprise fee, and I got Chloe this gorgeous diamond bracelet. His voice trailed off slightly, then picked up speed again. Anyway, we're facing some unexpected expenses. Credit card are maxed out, and Chloe's really stressed. Could you help us cover about 15 grand? Just until things settle down. I let the silence hang for a moment. My eyes locked on Eleanor's notebook, which I had left open on my desk as a reminder. I imagined her sitting beside me, looking over her glasses with that calm, gentle disappointment she reserved for moments when Nathan disappointed her, but she didn't want to crush him with it. I took a breath. "No," I said. One word. Clean. Precise. And for the first time in my life, final. On the other end of the line, there was a pause so long I thought he might have hung up. Then his voice snapped back, sharper now. "Wait, what do you mean no? Is there an issue with the transfer?" "No, Nathan," I repeated firmer. "I won't be sending you any more money." The silence returned, but now it had weight. I could feel his disbelief bleeding through the line. "Are you seriously saying no to me right now? After the week we've had?" My fingers tightened around the phone. "You mean the week where I buried your mother and you threw a party?" I asked calmly. "Yes, that week." His voice rose, the mask slipping away. "Come on, Dad. You're not even hurting for money. You've always said family helps family. Chloe and I were family." I looked around the office Eleanor had helped decorate, the walls lined with our family photos, all the milestones we thought meant something. Nathan as a toddler in the sandbox, Eleanor holding his hand at the science fair, high school graduation, college, engagement, wedding. So many images of love given freely, unconditionally, and now used like a battering ram against my self-worth. "You're 35 years old, Nathan," I said. "It's time you stop expecting everyone to clean up after you." He let out a bitter laugh. "You've changed, Dad. Ever since Mom died, You've been acting like some cold stranger. She would have wanted you to help us. The irony hit me like a punch. Eleanor had given him everything and died, wondering if any of it had mattered to him. Your mother wanted you at her funeral, I said. That's what she wanted. In the background, I could hear Chloe's voice rising. Tell him we already spent the money. He can't back out now. Nathan came back on the line, voice more urgent. Look, just send it this one last time. I'll pay you back. I promise. I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. No, Nathan. The answer is no. The pause this time was shorter. You know what? He snapped. If this is how it's going to be, then maybe we won't come around anymore. Maybe we'll just keep our distance. I closed my eyes. For 35 years, I had been manipulated by the threat of his absence. He'd used it like currency. Be there if I paid, disappear if I didn't. Understand, I said. You what? He said, clearly caught off guard. Understand, I repeated. Take care of yourself. Then I hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long moment. My heart didn't pound. My hands didn't shake. In fact, I felt a strange stillness settle over me, a calm I hadn't known in years. It wasn't pride. It wasn't satisfaction. It was release. I walked into the kitchen and brewed a pot of coffee, even though I barely drank it anymore. It had been Eleanor's ritual, and for some reason, I needed the smell of it in the house. As it percolated, I opened the mail and began sorting through bills. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and hot, the way Eleanor liked it, and stood at the kitchen window, staring out into her abandoned garden. A chill hung in the early morning air, but I didn't shiver. I just stood there, letting the silence confirm what I already knew. I had reached a breaking point. For decades, I'd run foster construction with a steady hand and a sharp mind. Eleanor used a joke that I treated the business with more discipline than I did my own household. Maybe she wasn't wrong. I had hired Nathan after he graduated college, telling myself it would be a chance to mentor him, to pass down not just a business, but a legacy. In truth, I'd handed him a job on a silver platter and shielded him from every consequence. His missed deadlines, his careless mistakes, his long lunches that bled into no-shows. I excused them all. He's still learning, I'd say to the team. But I knew better now. He wasn't learning. He was coasting. And I was enabling it. By 7 a.m., I was dressed and out the door, arriving at the office a full 2 hours earlier than Nathan ever managed to show up. I walked through the quiet lobby of Foster Construction, nodding at the security guard who looked slightly surprised to see me so early. My steps echoed off the polished floors as I passed the framed project photos and company awards that lined the hallway, each one a reminder of what I'd built from scratch. In my office, I pulled Nathan's personnel file from the locked cabinet. It wasn't a single folder, it was a stack. 8 years of infractions, poor reviews, client complaints, expense reports bloated with questionable charges. I'd seen it all before but ignored it, buried it under a father's blind hope. Now I read it with new eyes. I highlighted the worst of it: 2 missed safety inspections, a lost client worth $1.2 million, 3 HR complaints about inappropriate comments during site visits. I didn't need to justify my decision, but the documentation helped. At 8:45, I called Diana Harper into my office. She was my HR director, my longest-standing employee, and someone Eleanor had always trusted. Her expression didn't change when I laid out my plan. I've been waiting for this day, Richard, she said, professional but kind. He's been hurting this company for years. I'll have the termination paperwork ready in 10 minutes. And security? I asked. Standard protocol for management roles, she confirmed. By 9:15, everything was in place. I stood in front of the mirror in my private bathroom, rehearsing the words like they were lines in a courtroom drama. Nathan, your employment with Foster Construction is terminated effective immediately. Clean, legal, final. No explanations, no arguments. At 9:30 on the dot, Nathan strolled in through the lobby, 15 minutes late, as usual, chatting with the receptionist about how wild Chloe's party had been. I could hear his voice from my office. "We're still recovering from all the champagne," he laughed. I pressed the intercom. "Nathan, please come to my office immediately." There was a beat of silence, then a half-hearted reply. "Sure, Dad. Just grabbing some coffee." I leaned forward. "Now, Nathan." That changed his tone. His footsteps up the hall were slower than usual. When he entered, he froze. Diana sat to the right with a file folder in her hands, and I remained seated at my desk, hands folded, expression unreadable. "What's going on?" he asked, half laughing. "Why the formal vibe?" "Sit down," I said. He did slowly. I slid the papers across the desk. "Nathan Grant, your employment with Foster Construction is terminated effective immediately." He blinked, confused. "Is this a joke?" "It's not." "You're firing me? Seriously? After everything?" "This decision is based on your documented performance and professional conduct. Your role has been eliminated." He looked at Diana. "You're okay with this?" "I've documented everything," she replied without hesitation. "This should have happened years ago." "This is about Mom, isn't it?" he snapped. "You're punishing me because I didn't go to the funeral." "This is about the business," I said. "Nothing more." I pressed the security buzzer. Frank Delaney appeared at the door, calm and imposing. Nathan's face twisted. "You're not even giving me a chance to fix this." 8 years of chances," I said. "You wasted them." As Frank moved toward him, Nathan stood up abruptly, grabbing his coffee mug and the framed photo of him and Chloe. "You don't get it. You're just angry and bitter. Mom would be ashamed of this. Mom would be ashamed of what you've become," I replied. He glared at me, his pride collapsing in real time. Frank escorted him to his office to gather his things. I heard the whispers ripple through the hallway. Employees peeking from their offices, murmuring behind closed doors. When Nathan returned, cardboard box in hand, his eyes darted around, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Diana collected his badge and laptop, then nodded to Frank, who guided Nathan toward the exit. Then came the next twist. The elevator dinged. Out stormed Chloe, heels clacking against the marble floor, hair wind-tossed, eyes flaming. She bypassed the receptionist, burst into my office, and slammed her purse onto my desk. "How dare you," she spat. "Humiliate Nathan like this? This business belongs to him too." Yet I knew that cutting him loose from the company wasn't enough. What he and Chloe said in that office, about suing, about taking half of everything, about demanding severance from something he had never built, made something inside me click. They truly believed they were entitled not only to what I had, but to what Eleanor and I had built together with our bare hands over 4 decades of sacrifice. And that thought, more than anything, burned through the last remnant of hesitation I might have had. Eleanor's voice came back to me in that moment, not in a whisper of memory, but in the physical presence of her handwriting, tucked inside her notebook, beside the words, "We gave him everything." I hope he remembers us kindly. But he didn't remember. Not kindly. Not truthfully. He remembered the money, the easy access, the favors, the bailouts. He remembered how to ask and how to manipulate, but not once did he remember what it cost. Not once did he honor her final request, just to show up. I sat at my desk, staring at the picture of Eleanor on our 25th anniversary, smiling with her eyes, holding a sunflower Nathan had picked when he was 6. She had kept that photo on her nightstand until the day she died. I stood up, grabbed the folder that held our wills, insurance documents, retirement plans, and walked straight out the door. By 2:30 that afternoon, I was sitting in the corner office of Gregory Lane, my friend and our family attorney for over 20 years. The man had handled every contract I'd ever signed, incorporated Foster Construction, represented me in zoning battles, and drafted Eleanor's will. He was already on his feet when I entered, concern written across his face as he gestured for me to sit down. "Richard," he said gently, "how are you holding up?" I didn't answer his question. I opened the folder and placed the documents on the table between us. "I need to rewrite everything," I said. "Effective immediately. I want Nathan completely removed." Gregory blinked, clearly taken aback. "That's a serious move," he said. "You're sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I told him. He sat back slowly, folded his hands, and waited for me to explain. I did. I told him everything. From a morning call where Nathan dismissed Eleanor's funeral as an inconvenience, to the $15,000 request that followed it, to the termination at Foster Construction and Chloe's hysterical tirade about taking half of everything I owned. I told him about Eleanor's journal, the $847,000 tally of support we'd given Nathan, and the ache of watching it all amount to nothing. Gregory listened in silence, the kind of respectful, heavy silence that doesn't ask for breaks or validation. When I finished, he gave a solemn nod. "You're not doing this out of rage," he said. "You're doing this out of clarity." "Exactly," I replied. "I'm not punishing him. I'm protecting what's left of Eleanor's memory." Gregory opened a new folder, pulled out a clean set of documents, and began drafting. I outlined everything I wanted. A new will naming the primary beneficiary as the Eleanor Grant Memorial Foundation, a nonprofit to support the causes she had cared about most, scholarships for underprivileged students, grant for cancer research, community support centers for women in treatment. We agreed that Foster Construction, all business shares, the family home, all financial accounts, and future royalties would be transferred into an irrevocable trust under the foundation's ownership upon my passing. During my lifetime, I would retain operational control, but nothing would be left loose enough for Nathan or Chloe or anyone acting in their name to manipulate. I requested an explicit clause disinheriting Nathan and all of his descendants, with no exceptions. "Even future grandchildren?" Gregory asked, raising his brow. "Especially them," I said firmly. "I won't let them weaponize biology to worm their way into something they neither earned nor respected." He nodded and continued writing. We spent over an hour detailing the trust structure. I named Gregory as one of the board's trustees, along with Eleanor's friend Helen Conway and Diana Harper, our HR director, who had shown more integrity in 10 years than Nathan had shown in 35. We drafted a charter for the foundation that mirrored Eleanor's own values: dignity, education, resilience. Her name would live longer in acts of good than it ever could in a checking account. Gregory reviewed everything with meticulous care, ensuring no loopholes, no ambiguity. Then he brought in 2 legal witnesses to finalize the signing. My signature was steady as I etched my name onto the documents that would seal Nathan's exit from our legacy forever. When we were done, Gregory leaned back in his chair and looked at me not as an attorney, but as a friend. "You did something today that most men can't," he said. "You chose principle over comfort, legacy over obligation. Eleanor would be proud." I nodded, the knot in my chest loosening just slightly. "I want Nathan to be notified formally," I said. "Not by phone, not in passing. I want him to receive a letter, certified, with delivery confirmation, that he has been removed from all legal claims." "I'll take care of it," Gregory replied. "Every account, every trust, every document will reflect today's decision. It's binding and it's enforceable." Before I left, we also updated the power of attorney, medical directives, and financial guardianship paperwork. Nathan was removed from every line. If I became ill, incapacitated, hospitalized, he would have no say, no access, no right to intervene. They notice when a man who once smiled proudly beside his parents at charity auctions suddenly vanishes from public gatherings. Not because he's grieving, but because he chose to host a birthday party the same night his mother was laid to rest. I didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't have to. The truth has a way of traveling on its own in places like this, especially when it's wrapped in silence and shame. The first person who brought it up was William Reeves, the president of the Davenport Country Club Board. We were standing in the lobby during our monthly treasurers meeting. William, dressed in his usual blazer and tie, approached me gently. "Richard," he said, "the service was beautiful. Eleanor would have appreciated how many people came to honor her." I nodded, thanking him for the flowers he and his wife Linda had sent. Then came the inevitable question, spoken in the soft concern of someone trying not to overstep. "I kept looking for Nathan," he said. "Where was he?" I didn't hesitate. I didn't soften the truth. "He chose not to come," I said plainly. "He had a prior commitment, his wife's birthday party." The silence that followed was profound. William blinked, as if unsure he'd heard me correctly. "Her birthday party?" I nodded. "Caterers. A band. Custom cocktails, I assume." He shook his head slowly, lips tightening. Good Lord. Within days, I began hearing the echoes. Linda mentioned it at the bridge club, which meant it reached the wives of every businessman, banker, and lawyer in town. Helen Conway, Eleanor's sister, told a few friends at church. And soon it wasn't just gossip, it was consensus. It was judgment delivered without a trial, because the crime had been witnessed by all who knew Eleanor and valued what she stood for. Chloe fell to first. Her yoga instructor at the exclusive wellness studio downtown asked her to leave mid-session, citing a newly revised member standards policy. The next week, her credit line at Bergdorf's boutique was quietly suspended. Her usual sales associate, who once greeted her with hugs and espresso, now offered cold professionalism and short responses. Chloe tried to make a purchase, just a bottle of expensive mascara, but the payment didn't go through. When she asked why, the manager simply said, "We're reviewing all accounts with outstanding balances and inactive guarantors." Chloe had always used my name on those forms. Not anymore. Nathan's ostracism came more slowly, but just as decisively. His lunch reservations at Romano's, his favorite place to show off with colleagues, were mysteriously lost. The maitre d' offered apologies, but never a table. His golf foursome began to find excuses not to play. One Saturday, they simply left him behind, claiming a miscommunication. The golf pro pulled Nathan aside and said quietly, "Some members have raised concerns. Might be best to take a break." Even the Chamber of Commerce, where Nathan had once been a rising star thanks to my influence, grew cold. Business contacts stopped returning his calls. One by one, his scheduled interviews were canceled without explanation. A few even sent polite rejection emails before he'd arrived. It wasn't hard to see what was happening. Davenport's unspoken code had been violated. This wasn't about a missed appointment or a personal disagreement. It was about basic decency. Family mattered here. So did funerals. So did showing up. People respected Eleanor. They remembered her face at charity drives, her quiet support at church events, the way she sent handwritten thank you notes. They remembered the dignity she carried through cancer. And they remembered that her son didn't bother to stand at her gravesite. Nathan tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. He told anyone who would listen that I had overreacted, that we were having a family dispute, that I had turned cold after losing Eleanor. But even those who wanted to believe him couldn't explain away the core fact. He wasn't there. And Chloe? She tried to keep up appearances. She smiled too big at social events, tried too hard to act unfazed. But people saw through her. They remembered how loud her birthday party had been the night of the funeral, how the music could be heard from the country club parking lot, just 3 blocks from the cemetery. They remembered the photos she posted on social media, champagne in hand, glitter heels on marble floors. "Mr. Grant," he said cautiously, "I wanted to inform you that Nathan and Chloe's mortgage payment is now 30 days past due. Since you're still listed as guarantor, we're legally obligated to notify you." I didn't flinch. I had expected this moment. In fact, I had prepared for it. "Thank you, Sam," I said. "I'd like to come in and schedule a meeting to review that guarantee." He paused before responding. "Certainly. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, I said, then hung up and stared at the teacup in my hand, the one Eleanor used every morning. I imagined her watching this unfold, not with glee, but with solemn agreement. She had whispered it once, during one of Nathan's many emergencies, maybe we're doing too much for him. At the time, I had dismissed it, but now it echoed louder than ever. The next morning, I walked into the marble lobby of First National Bank, past oil portraits of its founders and a grand piano that no one ever played. Sam Price met me at the glass doors of his corner office overlooking the Mississippi River. We shook hands, and he gestured toward the table already covered in paperwork. Nathan and Chloe's mortgage agreements, loan files, and credit applications, all co-signed or backed by me. Sam looked uneasy as he Saturday. Their files gotten complicated, he admitted. The mortgage is nearly 60 days delinquent. Credit cards are maxed out. And with no verified income since Nathan's termination, well, the debt ratio is unsustainable. I nodded calmly. That's why I'm here. I opened the folder Gregory Lane had prepared for me. Inside were the legal documents to begin withdrawing my guarantee from every outstanding account connected to Nathan and Chloe. Sam read through the forms carefully, his eyes scanning each page before looking up. "You're sure about this?" "Completely," I replied. "They've had every opportunity. I'm done underwriting their irresponsibility." A speakerphone call with the bank's legal team confirmed what I already knew. So long as I provided 30 days notice in writing and met all procedural obligations, the guarantees could be lawfully revoked. I signed each form with a steady hand. Sam's signature followed, and with that, the final financial lifeline I had extended to Nathan was severed. The process triggered automatic review of all accounts tied to those guarantees, beginning with a mortgage. Sam looked down at the balance due and sighed. "Unless they come up with $18,400 by the end of next week, we'll have to begin foreclosure proceedings." "Do what you have to do," I said. I left the bank and walked out into the sunlit street, feeling the weight of responsibility shift. I wasn't punishing them. I was refusing to be their shield any longer. Across town, the consequences began to arrive with brutal speed. Nathan, who had already been rejected from every interview he landed since the funeral fiasco, sat in a coffee-stained shirt in yet another waiting room, only to be told again, "We'll let you know." His resume had begun to gather dust. Word had gotten around that he had been fired from his father's company. Not resigned, not laid off, but terminated. That kind of truth had a gravity of its own. Meanwhile, Chloe's world collapsed faster. At Nordstrom, her platinum card was declined in front of a line of customers. She smiled awkwardly, told the clerk it must be a system error, and asked to try again. It was declined a second time. She called the card issuer in a fury and was told the account had been frozen pending full repayment, triggered by the withdrawal of the co-signer. My name. The person on the phone was polite but firm. No amount of yelling would fix it. Their electricity was cut 3 days later. A red notice arrived taped to their front door, citing unpaid balances and warning of service suspension. That night, they sat in candlelight, eating takeout from a styrofoam container, the house silent except for the sound of Chloe's heels pacing the hardwood floors. Nathan tried to reassure her, claimed he was working on something, but she wasn't listening. She was too busy texting friends who no longer replied. Her frustration turned to rage. "You promised me stability," she snapped. "I'm married into success, Nathan, not failure." I stare at the auction notice the day it arrived, the black ink clear and cold. This was the home Eleanor had once planted daisies in front of, the home she had never visited again after Chloe's chilly welcome and Nathan's half-hearted hospitality. I remembered how proud Eleanor was to help them buy it, believing it was an investment in her son's future. Now, years later, it had become a monument to entitlement and waste. I spent 2 days speaking with Gregory Lane and my secretary Diana Harper, and by the end of the week, Mitchell Holdings LLC was formed, a clean, legally distinct entity with no traceable ties to the grant name. I wanted the purchase to be clean, quiet, efficient. Not revenge, just the closing of a chapter. Diana, ever professional, understood exactly what was being asked of her. On the morning of the auction, I parked across from the courthouse in my black sedan, wearing a dark overcoat and a hat pulled low. I didn't plan to bid. That would have been too obvious, too personal. Instead, Diana arrived promptly, dressed in a navy pantsuit, clipboard in hand, sunglasses masking her expression. She stood among a modest crowd, contractors, investors, curious townspeople, none of whom knew who she was or who she represented. Nathan and Chloe stood apart, their faces pale and drawn. Chloe looked jittery, her arms crossed tightly, sunglasses perched on her head, though the sky was overcast. Nathan stood beside her with his jaw clenched, eyes scanning the crowd for anyone he might recognize, hoping someone would step forward to save them. There was no one. The auctioneer called out the address and opened bidding at $280,000. One man raised his hand, an investor from out of town. Then Diana raised hers, calm and steady. Another bid followed. Diana countered. The numbers crept upward, $295, 000, $305,000, $310,000. The other bidder hesitated. Diana lifted her hand one final time. $317,000, she said. Going once, going twice, sold. Chloe screamed. "This is our home." Her voice pierced the quiet street, causing heads to turn. "You can't do this to us." The auctioneer ignored her. The sale was final. Nathan stood frozen, blinking slowly as Diana walked forward to sign the paperwork. Then realization began to spread across his face. His eyes followed Diana as she handed the check and received the title packet. Then he saw Gregory Lane standing beside the car where Diana would be driven away. Nathan's face drained of color. He whispered to Chloe, "That's Dad's lawyer." Her voice came out panicked. He wouldn't, he couldn't, but he had. And the truth hit him harder than anything I could have said. Every piece of it had been calculated. The withdrawal of the guarantee, the precise timing, the bidding amount that matched the remaining loan to the dollar. I watched from my car, unmoving, as Nathan stumbled forward, trying to reach Diana. Courthouse security intercepted him. "Please, I need to talk to her," he begged. "This is a mistake." Diana didn't flinch. She handed the papers to Gregory, nodded once, and walked away. Chloe collapsed onto the courthouse steps, crying into her hands, her perfect manicure smudged with makeup. Nathan stood in place, staring at the ground like a man who had finally seen the entire length of his fall. I waited until the crowd had cleared before exiting my vehicle. When I walked toward the steps, Nathan looked up. "You did this," he said. Not a question, just a realization. "I didn't do anything," I replied calmly. "The bank did. I simply paid attention." "This was Mom's favorite house," he said, as if that would change anything. "She loved the garden. She never set foot inside after Chloe told her to text first next time." I reminded him, "You made that home yours, and then you let it rot." Chloe stood up then, eyes red and wild. "This is elder abuse. You're crazy." We'll get a lawyer. We'll reverse this. Gregory stepped forward. Everything about this auction was legal. You were notified. You failed to pay. It's done. She lunged toward him, shrieking, but security moved between them. The scene played out like a slow motion unraveling. Their entitlement, once concealed under charm and youth, now looked like a tantrum. The couple who once hosted wine tastings and luxury brunches now stood on public pavement, homeless and humiliated. 2 weeks later, a moving truck arrived at 1247 Maple Avenue. I didn't go, but Diana provided updates. Nathan loaded boxes quietly, avoiding eye contact with the neighbors. Chloe threw things into suitcases with wild frustration. At one point, she slammed a lamp into the driveway and screamed, "I'm married into a legacy. Not this." Diana told me that was the last straw. She left that night, moved in with an ex-boyfriend who owned a local restaurant chain. Nathan spent one final night in the empty house alone. For the first time since her death, I felt like I was doing something that truly honored her. But that peace I knew wouldn't last forever. And it didn't. One cold November evening at precisely 7:30 p.m., a car pulled up to my house and idled quietly in the driveway. I stood by the window without drawing the curtain. I recognized the figure immediately. Nathan stepped out slowly, his posture hunched and shoulders narrower than I remembered. He wore jeans and a wrinkled plaid shirt. No jacket. He stood at the door for a full minute before raising his hand. The doorbell rang once, then silence. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. We stood there facing each other, the porch light casting shadows across his hollow face. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 months. "Dad," he said, voice shaking, "I know I've messed up." I didn't say a word. He continued, rehearsed but desperate. "I've lost everything. Chloe's gone. She left a month ago. I live in a studio apartment above a laundromat. I work nights at a gas station. I mop the floor. I stock the shelves. Sometimes I pump gas when the night guy doesn't show." He laughed once, bitter and short. "I miss Mom. I really do. I want to be a better man. For her. For you." Still, I said nothing. He shifted awkwardly on his feet. "I know I let you down. I know I didn't show up when it mattered most. But I've changed. I swear. I don't care about money anymore. I care about family." He looked at me, eyes red. "Please, can we start over?" That was when I asked it. Simple, direct, cutting through the fog of emotion. "When is your mother's birthday?" He blinked, confused. "What?" "Her birthday," I repeated. "Tell me the date." He hesitated, stammered. "June 15th. I shook my head. "March 3rd. He swallowed. "Okay, maybe I got it mixed up. What was her favorite flower?" I asked. "Roses?" "Daisies," I said, letting the word hang like a verdict. His face collapsed in on itself. "Come on, Dad. That's not fair. That's not what this is about." "It's exactly what this is about," I said. "You say you want to change, but you never bothered to learn who your mother really was." He tried again. "Look, I didn't come here to fight. I just want to make things right. I know I don't deserve forgiveness overnight, but I thought maybe you'd let me help. Around the house, or maybe at the foundation. Something to give me a purpose again." I stared at him, at the lines in his face that hadn't been there before, at the hollow under his eyes, the way his voice trembled not just from the cold, but from something deeper, shame or perhaps fear. I reached behind the door and brought out Eleanor's notebook. I flipped to the final entry, the one written in her softest script, the one she'd left for me, but meant for him. I read aloud. "I'm afraid Nathan only loves our money. What if we've raised a child who can't love?" He froze, his mouth opened slightly, as if the words hit him harder than any rebuke I could have delivered. "She wrote that," he whispered. "She knew," I said, "and she still loved you. But she wasn't blind anymore." He started to protest, but then his voice broke and he slumped slightly against the porch post. I didn't mean for things to go this way, he said. I was just caught up. I thought there'd always be time. I didn't realize how much I was hurting everyone until it was too late. It wasn't one mistake, Nathan, I said. It was a pattern. Years of disregard. You used our love like it was your birthright. You treated support as an expectation, not a gift. And when we finally asked for something small, just to show up, you chose champagne and party lights. I miss her, he said suddenly, voice cracking. I miss her every single day. I nodded. I do too. But missing her doesn't mean you deserve what she left behind. He wiped at his face with his sleeve. Then what do I have to do? Just tell me. I'll do it. It's not about doing anymore, I said. It's about being. It's about becoming someone who doesn't ask for chances, someone who earns them. So, there's still a chance? The morning after Nathan stood on my porch and failed to remember his mother's birthday or her favorite flower, I woke early, before the sun rose above the trees in the backyard Eleanor used to love. The frost hadn't yet melted from the garden stones, and everything in the house was still and quiet. I brewed a single cup of black coffee, the same way Eleanor used to take it when she needed to think, and I sat by the bay window holding her notebook in one hand and the final draft of the foundation's mission plaque in the other. Gregory Lane had sent it the night before for my final review, before the engraving was made permanent. The original version, drafted hastily months ago, included both our names, founded in memory of Eleanor and Richard Grant, for the future she believed in. But after the months I'd endured, after the silence at the funeral, the entitlement, the public unraveling, the foreclosure, the lies, the manipulation, I realized something had shifted permanently in me. This legacy wasn't about both of us anymore. It had always been about her. She was the one who remembered birthdays, who sent handwritten cards, who stayed up late baking cookies for school drives Nathan never thanked her for. She was the one who folded back into the community even while dying, never once asking for sympathy. She had a strength that didn't announce itself, a grace that didn't need applause. And now, that's what this foundation would stand for. I picked up the pen and scratched out my name. The new version read, founded in honor of Eleanor Grant, a life of quiet strength. I sent the final approval to Gregory that morning. By noon, the engraver had received the order. By Friday, the bronze plaque was mounted at the front entrance of the foundation's new headquarters, a building Nathan once helped place the cornerstone for, back when he still wore suits and shook hands like he believed he belonged in the future we were building. That cornerstone had originally borne his name beneath mine. I had insisted on it at the time, trying to show confidence in his potential. I visited the building personally that Friday, walked to the eastern corner where the stone sat low in the shadow of the flagpole, and read the faded letters. Our Grant 2021. I stood silently for a long time. Then I instructed the grounds crew to remove the stone. We replaced it with a new one, E.G. Foundation for Lives Yet to Blossom. It was simple, beautiful, and truthful. The following week, we hosted the Foundation's inaugural award ceremony in the refurbished community auditorium. We had received dozens of scholarship applications, but one had stood out to everyone on the board. A young woman named Anna Morales, daughter of a single mother, first in her family to go to college, majoring in oncology because she wanted to help kids survive the disease that took her aunt. Anna walked on stage with trembling hands and a humility that reminded me instantly of Eleanor. Gentle voice, thoughtful words, a kind of gratitude that wasn't performative but deeply felt. She didn't wear designer shoes or talk about investments or ask what the award was worth in dollars. Instead, she said, "This grant isn't just a check. It's a sign that someone believes in me, and I promise not to waste it." My throat tightened. In that moment, I saw the future Eleanor had hoped for. Quiet strength, quiet grace, someone who understood that opportunity was a gift, not a guarantee. Anna reminded me of the woman who raised Nathan, the woman whose memory I'd spent the past year protecting not with vengeance, but with clarity. After the event, Anna came to thank me. She shook my hand and said, "I didn't know Mrs. Grant, but I feel like I carry a part of her now. I'll make her proud." I smiled, holding back tears. "You already have." Later that night, I returned to my empty home. The walls still carried the echo of Eleanor's voice, especially in the study where she used to hum while organizing foundation notes, or in the kitchen where she kept her daisy-patterned mugs. I lit one of the candles she used to love, the lavender one with a worn-down wick, and sat by the fireplace. There were no calls from Nathan that night, no knocks on the door, just the silence of a man who had finally accepted what he had lost. And I, too, accepted what I had gained. I didn't need to be remembered alongside Eleanor. I only needed to make sure she wasn't forgotten under someone else's shadow. This was her foundation, her legacy, her final wish honored not in courtrooms or bank statements, but in the heart of a girl named Anna Morales and all the others who would come after her, walking through a door Eleanor helped build without ever needing to open it herself. The next morning, I went to the garden behind a foundation building where volunteers had planted flowers to honor Eleanor's memory. Among the lilies and roses, someone had carefully planted daisies, simple, bright, and brave. I knelt down, touched one of the petals, and whispered, "You were right, Ellie. Quiet strength changes the world." I stood up, heart full, and walked back inside to finish the work we had started together. The end. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me to tell it, I'd be grateful if you'd hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps bring more of these stories to life. And I'd love to know, what part of this journey struck you the hardest? Was it the moment I took back the house? Or when I asked Nathan the question he couldn't answer? Tell me in the comments. Also, where in the world are you watching from? I read every message, and your thoughts mean more than you think.